Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday YouTube channel. I am your host, Ryan Hartley. This channel is for heart-centered leaders just like you. I hope our time spent together helps you leave a heartprint where those around you are left better than yesterday. These interview sessions are sponsored by our great friends at Elevate Online Marketing. On episode 192, I'm joined by Maureen Murdock. Maureen is an author, an educator, and a photographer. Maureen combines her interests in the mysterious workings of the psyche with a study of mythology and a love of storytelling and memoir writing. She helps people explore meaning in their lives through the excavation of their memories in lectures and workshops throughout the United States. Maureen is the author of 7 books, including the Heroines Journey. I've been fortunate to be in the corner of many women over the last 5 years here at Always Better Than Yesterday, and there's something about the way in which the world works that is not entirely serving of their souls and of their spirit. And I think the great work that Maureen has brought into the world provides some great context for a woman to go on that journey, the heroine's journey, and in some way bring her closer to herself, her body, her soul and her spirit. So I hope that this next 45 minutes of conversation inspires you, your heart, your mind, your soul, your spirit, and to take the next step along your heroine's journey. Please do share this episode with another heroine you'd like to inspire. Here we go, episode 192 with Maureen Murdock. Maureen, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you?
I'm good, Ryan. It's good to see you.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. There is so much wisdom that I'm going to try and download from you in the next 45 minutes for personal benefit and hopefully for the benefit of many people that listen. But it's been 30 years since one of your most famous creations. What has it been 30 years since the publication of?
The Heroine's Journey. The Heroine's Journey came out in 1990, and it's had quite a ride for itself. It's right now in 17 languages. The last copy I got was the Czech copy of the Heroine's Journey. And when it first came out, I heard from women all over the world. It was very exciting. It touched a nerve at the time that it came out in 90, and it's just had this wonderful life of its own. In 90, I think it was 98, Shambhala asked me to do a workbook. So the Heroine's Journey workbook came out then, so that women could go through the stages of the heroine's journey, either by themselves or most likely in small groups. And that's what happened. Women started to take the exercises in that book and go through all the stages of the heroine's journey. But I've been most gratified by the fact that it's even in Farsi. I mean, to think about the women in Iran being able to read it. I understand that it's heavily redacted, but at least they get some sense of a heroic journey for women.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? You know, so much of society, so much of culture is just shaped by these masculine values and ideologies. And one of the things that I really like about the heroine's journey is that it doesn't take a pop at the hero's journey. It doesn't take the book and go, here's everything wrong with that. Here's why you're wrong. Here's why I'm right. But it's a complementary journey to with which to set context and understanding. It's very I like the way you've done that, and I guess take me back to that meeting with Joseph Campbell, the author of The Hero's Journey. How did that conversation go with him?
Well, I knew him because he would come out from New York to do workshops for what was then called the Human Relations Institute. And he's a lovely man, a real gentleman and a brilliant scholar and a brilliant teacher. And so I had taken the monomyth, or the diagram that he created from gathering myths from all over the world. Um, I had taken that and had been working with that as a teacher at UCLA in the writers program. We were using the monomyth, or the diagram of the hero's journey. And also in therapy groups, I was using it with both men and women in a 10 month workshop using all of the stages of Campbell's hero's journey. And the more I did that, I'm a psychotherapist, so I was really looking at it through that lens. The more I did that, the less I just felt like something was missing for women. And what was clear in doing those workshops is that women were deeply wounded in their feminine nature, and that's what needed to be healed. So when I went back from Los Angeles to New York to show Mr. Campbell my particular diagram or monomyth, whatever you want to call it, he said to me, Maureen, women don't need to make the journey. They're the place that everyone is trying to get to. And I think what he meant mythologically, the feminine is the place that everyone is trying to get to in terms of spirit, spirituality. But I said, well, that's not my experience, because women of my generation had just gotten out into the work world and were doing the hero's journey, and it was wounding. And so his response really inspired me to finish the book, because I realized he couldn't really understand what our journey is and was. He was in his 80s. He was married to Jean Erdman, this extraordinary dancer. He had his muse. We didn't have a muse. So, but no, I never wanted to say, the women's journey is one way in relationship to his. I had enormous respect for him. And so that's how the book emerged. It took me 8 years to write the book, because it really came out of the experiences of the women I was working with, both as writers and also as patients in my therapy practice.
I read something in your book. It says that it was inspired through your back. And was that a manifestation of your own stress? I understand you had a back injury. Was that your own kind of separation from the feminine that was manifesting?
That's a great question. What had happened was I was in training at the LA Family Institute, and we were doing an exercise. And in that exercise, we were enacting a particular scene in our family of origin. And I was bending over backwards to keep the peace in the family, and my back went out. And I realized at that point how separated I was from my own my own body. And that really is the first stage of the heroine's journey, the separation from the feminine. However you define the feminine for yourself. For me, it really was my physical body, but the feminine for a lot of women is their creativity, their intuition, so many different things. And it has a lot to do with the relationship with the mother. If a woman has seen her mother as passive or angry or unrelatable. Oftentimes there is this separation from the feminine and an idealization of the
Mm.
masculine. And I wrote the book from the perspective of a father's daughter,
Mm-hmm.
which means that women, um, not necessarily having to identify with their own father, but
Yep.
who have idealized the masculine in an effort to fit
Yeah.
in an effort to get ahead. And,
Mm.
you mentioned before we started
Mm-hmm.
the podcast about having a 7-year-old daughter, which is
Yep.
so wonderful that you have the opportunity to support this budding feminine into adulthood and to recognize her
Yeah.
unique qualities and affirm them.
Hey friends, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I just wanted to let you know on the 24th of October, I will be welcoming 12 men to the Always Better Than Yesterday Good Fathers program. It is 6 weeks of online journeying with 12 good men. I really believe that if I can help good men become even better men, then better men will make better dads. It's been 10 years since I became a father, and it has been the most fulfilling journey, but full of challenges and obstacles that I probably was under-equipped for. I didn't feel prepared for the sacrifice, the tiredness, the impact on our health, let alone what it means to be a good husband and a good teammate as we try and journey in becoming the best dad possible. These children don't come with guides, and it just, for me, I felt like whilst I wanted to be the best dad I could possibly be, I've definitely felt a sense of winging it. And it doesn't seem to be conversations that men seem to have about what it means to be a dad. So I've set up Good Fathers. It's the first program that I'm offering dedicated specifically to men, good men who want to become even better dads. Come and join us. We're starting on the 24th of October. Use the link in the show notes to come and read more about it. But first and foremost, this will be a safe space for men to explore their purpose as a father. It's going to contain a combination of coaching, learning, conversation and reflection. Each week we'll follow a semi-structured topic of conversation. I'll support you with resources and prompts designed to facilitate a powerful, transformative experience. You will not only learn from me, but from each other and shared experiences. I do not have all the answers, but I will hope to create an environment and a space for you and other good men to reflect and to create much more of an intentional style of parenting that will help you leave that legacy by becoming the best possible dad that you can be. If you know a good man that would benefit from this container, this time and space, please do share them, the show notes. It's www.abty.co.uk/good-fathers. That's Good Fathers on our website. Here we go, back to the conversation. She's certainly got some unique qualities, I can assure you that.
I'm sure. I'm sure she has a very creative father, so she gets to see that, that is something she might aspire to in the world.
What might be some of the reasons that she and many others will disconnect from the feminine?
Well, as I mentioned before, if there is a negative relationship with the mother, and also just looking at the images of the feminine in our culture, and I mean, there's so many ways to disconnect the whole idea of can I have autonomy of my own body? And
Yeah.
can I have equality in the work world? We've been fighting for that in the second wave of feminism since the early 70s, and we still don't have equality.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and some of the things that you pick out within your book reveal the big responsibility society places on the mother for the raising of children, and yet the complete disrespect and the lack of value that's placed. A lot of the comments will come about the father's success, the father's achievements, the father, so it's almost like a double whammy. They're ultra responsible and yet get none of the reward, and I guess that leads to a lot of I guess to adopt that.
Frustration.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, yeah. And particularly mothers of the women of my generation.
Yeah.
These were the women after the Second World War who had gone out during the Second World War and had jobs. The men come home from the Second World War, they all have to go home. They lose that sense of autonomy and empowerment. And in the the late 50s, 60s, early 70s, they had no choice about child rearing or childbearing. So it was a whole different situation than it is for my generation and generations that come after, who until the recent Dodd's decision, have had choice whether to carry a child full term. So to go back to what you were saying, they had a sense of empowerment. They come home. It's all their responsibility and no kudos. And they certainly don't get paid.
So we've got a daughter that looks up to the father, wants to be, go out into the world, find some form of success, academia, achievement. And then in doing so, in obtaining that, goes back to mum saying, hey, look how much I've done and achieved. And the mother's like, I'm not impressed by that. So it's like a full circle, because the mother then doesn't, validate that stuff, further reinforcing the separation between mother and daughter.
Well, maybe doesn't validate, but maybe is angry and envious. Yeah. So I'm not saying at all that all mothers are like that, but I'm saying when I wrote this book 30 years ago, it was a different historical and cultural point. So I think, things have changed to a large degree, but women still make, at least in the United States, 21 cents less per dollar than men do. So there's still this attitude that the feminine is less than. And that's actually one of the things I was looking at in the Road of Trials was, what are the myths that we live with? We have the myth of dependency, we have the myth of inferiority, we have the myth of romantic love, that are cultural myths that we still feel. Whether I think we're not aware of them at all.
Thank you, Disney.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Disney.
Yeah, well, exactly. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah.
Because those images of those princesses, shall we say, filter into a perception of what it means to be feminine, and I guess along comes that with it being weak, too emotional, or whatever that might be.
Right. Yeah. How does your daughter relate to
well, this is really interesting because a lot of the modern Disney, their lead female characters, like your Moanas, they're strong, they're brave, they're courageous, and they'll see how far they'll go.
Yeah.
So my daughter from a very young age has had a very different female cast lead to what would have been there 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And you asked before about the separation from the feminine. Just think of all the fairy tales. The mother is the evil stepmother, or she's dead. I mean, what did we have to identify?
Right.
Who could be evil or dead?
Well, slim pickings. It's really interesting. So for context of the journey for our listeners, we've got the start of the journey is the separation from the feminine, and then becomes this identification with the masculine. You've then just touched on the road of trials, and I think sometimes when then we can go out into the world, the woman, the feminine, can find success, and
Yes.
that can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing, right?
Um, I wouldn't call it a bad thing. I would say that
Hmm.
what really happened 30 years ago was that there was no balance,
Mm,
work-life balance.
mm,
And I would get letters from women who were working in the IT field saying that nothing feminine or relational was alive and
mm.
present in the IT field. Uh,
Yeah.
I'd love to read one tiny piece if I can find it quickly from a woman um, who worked in there. She said, women who join a high-tech company enter a very masculine model. The
Mm,
Silicon Valley environment is one in which competition is fierce, and the survivors are those in whom the male fighter is strong and intact.
mm,
Feelings of compassion, understanding, support are dangerous to one's career.
mm,
Thus, I believe males in this model reject their own female nature and, of course,
mm,
reject anyone who reminds them of it. In
mm,
retrospect, I find that I and the women that I worked with slowly lost touch with our inner strength as if
mm,
hypnotized. I think that says it. Um, and of course, that's not true of all fields, but it
mm,
was something that many women were describing at that time. And
mm,
so then the next stage in the journey is finding the boon of success,
mhm,
whatever that goal was, but then starting to awaken to feelings of what I called spiritual aridity and
mhm,
depth,
mm,
really feeling cut off from the body, from emotions,
mm,
from their creativity. And so many women would talk about my river of creativity has dried up.
mm.
And it's interesting that this woman who wrote that letter talked about operating as if she's hypnotized.
Right. Really powerful. And just to clarify what I meant by sometimes it could be not a good thing, that's obviously subjective, but it can lead to, we can achieve all the things and yet still feel a sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. Because I think, and you can respond to this and tell me I'm wrong, but I think that women have a much harder time feeling a sense of satisfaction, feeling a sense of, okay,
Mhm,
I did that.
mm,
That's great. I think that
mm.
we need to really reinforce for women that they've done enough.
Yeah.
They don't have to do more
Yeah.
to prove their worth.
Well, many of the amazing women that fortunate enough to be in the corner of, the challenge is that they are so good at the doing that they need to be reminded to do the being. And in
Yeah,
so much of the doing, it's so that they can become someone
yeah,
that actually, when they get to that point of achieving that thing, they're so used to doing that they've forgotten that they've actually become the person they wanted to be anyway. So it's a complete, I guess, what it's the detachment. It's the detachment from mind, body,
yeah.
and
And
how do,
emotions. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely. I think, very, very incredible women, very, very gifted, skillful, talented, have achieved wonderful things. And yet still there's an unsettled spirit in the present.
Yeah, there's always looking for more closure.
Sure. I
Yeah.
thought I would feel, in quote.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
I'd feel X, Y, and Z.
Right. And why aren't I? Isn't my problem?
Mm,
See, I think it's a cultural problem. And I think it's one probably of the masculine as well. But I think, we haven't moved as a culture to say to women, you're enough.
yeah, well, yeah, and we can go down the rabbit hole of the agenda of marketing, of the purpose of cultures, because unfortunately, we're led by lack.
Yes.
Everything attacks lack. Why? Because that creates a need to buy a product.
Right.
If
Right.
we come to the world like the goddess, and we're one, and we have all that we need, we can't be sold to. We don't make a company of money, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So how
So
does
the
one
next
yeah,
thing,
so how does one ascend to the goddess then, if that is the next stage? Sorry.
yeah, I think what happens is a woman gets to a particular place and realizes there's a whole other aspect of myself that
Mm,
I have not explored. And oftentimes it really comes with a break,
yeah.
meaning they decide, you know, to stop doing whatever job they're doing, or they have a real descent.
Yeah.
And I don't like to call it a depression because
Hmm.
I really see it as a sacred journey
Hmm.
to explore, okay, those different aspects of myself that I cut off in
Mm,
the beginning of my journey to achieve in a masculine world. So, what comes up usually are a lot of
yeah.
feelings, a lot of anger, particularly if they are from a family where the feminine was abused.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and it usually happens in midlife.
yeah.
And there's this sense of uh, time. There is no time. Time
Mm,
becomes
mm,
endless. There's no morning, noon, or night. There's
mm,
just this stage of really having to sit
yeah.
with the parts of self that have been disowned or discarded.
Does
And
this process have to be self-initiated, or can the universe say, "Hey, it's time for that break"? Like,
oh, very good question. It's the universe absolutely is partnering
yeah.
with the woman at that time.
Hmm.
Um, I remember doing a lecture in some university, and I started to talk about this. This woman raised her hand in the back, and she said, "That's where I am. That's where I am in my journey."
Yeah.
She said, "I'm the owner of a business.
Yeah.
And one day I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't recognize myself anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so she said, I went home
Yeah.
and I sat in my room for a month and my family was really upset. But she
Mm,
said, I needed to really become reacquainted with myself.
yeah.
So I called that stage in the book um, a time of voluntary isolation,
Mm, mm,
really meaning having time to be with oneself. And
mm,
out of that, for a lot of women, becomes this sense of connection to their feminine spirituality. And a lot
mm,
of women,
mm.
particularly in the 70s and 80s, and now started to do research on ancient goddesses.
I heard something recently when it came to a pastor talking about a Christian faith that says, when you find love for self, when you find love within, you find God, because God is love. And I guess, is that the same then thing for a woman when she finds that time with self when she goes into that exploration of self? Does she come face to face with the goddess?
Yeah, I absolutely think so.
Mm,
And there's so many different aspects of the goddess to come face to face
mm,
with.
mm.
But two of the ones that I write about in the book are the Demeter Persephone myth, the really healing of that separation of the feminine from the mother. And
Yeah.
then also the Sumerian Inanna Ereshkigal myth, looking at the descent and then
Mm,
the ascent. And with the ascent coming back, honoring just those aspects of self that
yeah.
one chooses
Yeah.
instead of being driven by the
Yeah.
culture.
One of the things you said is to have the perseverance not to rise to the light too soon.
Right.
What does
Yeah,
that mean?
because it's uncomfortable down
Mm,
there in the
mhm,
descent,
mhm.
and we want the quick fix, whether it's food
Yeah,
or sex or money or
yeah,
the next job. It's like, oh, this is too
yeah.
uncomfortable. Let's move on.
That's it. I'm healed. Oh, time to go. Thank you, universe.
Yeah, I only love myself a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. That's really powerful. And I think one of the things is, this step here. If you find yourself in this step, just know that there's like you're already 7 steps in.
Right, right.
This isn't the beginning. This is already 7 steps in.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the positive things of the map or the diagram, that
Mm,
we realize, okay, we've gone through half of the
mm,
stages, and there is light at the end of the
yeah,
tunnel. And one thing I want to say about the Heroine's Journey, it's something that we take over and over and over
sure.
again. It's never finished.
Yes.
um, that's the big difference between a feminine spirituality and a masculine spirituality.
Hmm.
The feminine, the old goddess myths were all about eternal return,
Yeah,
whereas the masculine myths are about the quest, that
sure.
at the end that there's a boon, and I go
Mm,
home and everyone applauds. Well, it's not like that. We keep going through different aspects of this journey throughout our whole life.
I love that because it makes me think rather than a circle, but a spiral of ascension. Because
Exactly.
because the final step is when we integrate.
Right.
And when we integrate the masculine and the feminine, that always then leaves space for new levels of consciousness. And how do we then
Exactly.
start to integrate new levels of consciousness, both within the masculine and the feminine?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the partnership.
Mm.
Yeah.
Just to pick up where we got to then in terms of the ascension, the initiation and ascent to the goddess, you talk about an urgent yearning to reconnect with the feminine. What is, I think you touched on it at the very start, what is the essence of the feminine?
Oh, I think many different aspects. I think about certainly caretaking,
Mm,
certainly preservation,
yeah,
um, certainly curiosity, certainly creativity,
yeah.
um, a sense of empowerment, um, that that is different than a masculine sense of
Mm,
achievement.
mm,
So, and I would also say compassion, but I guess the core, you're asking for the core, and I think it's relational,
mm. So,
relational to self,
yeah.
relation to others, relation to nature, relation to spirituality.
And it sounds like the world of business and leadership could do with this more now than ever. I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with Dr. Bruce Lipton. And one of the things that Bruce talks about in spontaneous evolution is that he says that the future of leadership is mammalian, and then
Uh-huh.
the characteristics of a mammal is one of nurturing.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
we've already got an essence of creativity within kind of modern design in leadership. But absolutely, I think the world needs that feminine, nurturing, that spirit soon, very, very soon, if not now. Which is
Yeah,
effectively a lot of what I represent, in terms of being heart centered, and I want the men that are listening to also realize that, the masculinity at its most sacred and divine is one of purpose and provision and love
right.
and service and sacrifice. If any woman out there has been wronged by a man abusing his power, that was never masculinity. That was
Right.
never pure form masculinity. What do you perceive about what I've just said?
Oh, well, the archetype of the masculine is protection and preservation.
Mm,
So I think a lot of men in the past
yeah.
have felt like, well, I went out to work and I made a living, and that's enough.
Hmm.
They forgot about what needed to be done in the home
Sure.
to protect and preserve. So
Yeah. Mm,
um, I think men of your generation are really modeling a new masculine. One of the stages that I get to in the heroine's journey is the healing the wounded masculine,
yes.
which I think has a lot to do for women identifying the wounded masculine in oneself
Mm,
and healing that. And what I meant by that is, if I think for myself, what is a wounded aspect of my own masculine, I would
mm,
call it the
mm,
driver that never lets me stop. There's a positive aspect of that
yeah.
because of discipline. I'm very disciplined,
Hmm.
but the driver really in my history has caused me not to pay attention to my body and then to
Mm,
have physical and emotional breaks going
yes.
back to the descent.
So,
So,
how did
you
you
know,
then heal that wounded element? How did you heal that?
how do you heal it? First of
Yeah.
all, identifying it. I
Yeah.
mean, really, and noticing what projection we do onto the men in our lives.
Yeah.
Um, and looking at that and saying, oh, is that really him or is that me?
Hmm.
And then starting to acknowledge the very positive aspects of the masculine. One of the ones I really have given a lot of thought to is backing oneself up. I think the
Hmm.
masculine is very, very good at that.
Yeah.
And discerning, whether, okay, is this soul based or not? Is this heart based or not?
Mm.
Um, but going back to the archetype of really looking at protection and preservation.
What does integration look like, sound like, feel like?
It's a balance of masculine and feminine. And I do want to read you something about that. I found a quote in Dine Bahana, which is a book about the Navajo creation myth.
Mhm.
So do you mind if I read that?
Yes,
Because,
please.
yeah, I think this is a perfect description or myth about integration. So in terms of integration, the current problems are not solved. This is not from Dine Bahana, this is from me. The conflicts remain, but one's suffering, as long as one does not evade it, will lead to a new life. So in
Mm,
developing a new feminine consciousness, we have to have an equally strong masculine consciousness,
mhm.
or else we can't get our voice out into the world. And the Navajo creation myth, Changing Woman, speaks to her consort, the sun. She says, Remember, as different as we are, you and I, we are of one spirit. As dissimilar as we are, you and I, we are of equal worth. As unlike as you and I are, there must always be solidarity between the two of us. Unlike each other as you and I are, there can be no harmony in the universe as long as there is no harmony between us. If there is to be such harmony, my requests must matter to you. My needs are as important to me as yours are to you. My whims count as much as yours do. My fidelity to you is measured by your loyalty to me. My response to your needs is to reflect the way you respond to mine. There is to be nothing more coming from me to you than there is from you to me. There is to be nothing less. I think that's just such a heartful way of talking about the integration of the masculine and feminine, that there must be equality to some degree and completion to some degree and respect. So that's the way I see it.
I'm really grateful for you sharing that. I just want to play back some things that came to me whilst you were speaking. One is that if there are winners, there are losers. You know, there's that if one seeks to push forward their own needs or agenda first, then it by product creates a loser, and that there's no space. There's no space for that, both internally. But the other thing that came to me was the exponential. If we take, you know, an individual level, we have that inner harmony, that balance, and then we have relationships, then we have communities, civilizations. It's that it's all relevant.
Yes.
Such a huge implication for how we behave and treat each other, right?
Right. Yeah, and when we were talking about the mother before, if you think about the Latin mater, its relationship to matter, to the earth, that we need to heal.
Someone said to me earlier today in a conversation about the healing, the healing that's provided by nature and earth. What does that really mean then, Mother Earth, Mother Nature, in terms of how do you interpret that Latin?
I used to be an ocean swimmer, and I would imagine being held by the Great Mother as I was swimming and being with the waves. That was extraordinarily healing for me. And I think about the image of whales giving birth. I don't know whether you know that they have, in a sense, handmaidens, that other female whales hold them in the water as they're giving birth. Wow. It's this extraordinary image of being held and being supported as one is in union with creation. So, but another thing that I think of with your question, I used to lead vision quests for women where we would be out in the wilderness for 7 days on solos and really listening to Mother Nature. You know, what do the birds want to say? What do the breeze want to say? What does the rain want to say? So it's really being in meditation with nature.
She's always speaking. It's just whether we've developed the capacity to listen.
Right. Yeah.
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 And you're very brave, because that West Coast water is pretty chilly, right?
It is chilly. Yeah. And yeah.
I came to LA once thinking, I was on my honeymoon with my wife, and I was thinking about this image, surfing on the West Coast. We went out to Malibu, and I was not expecting it to be so cold.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You have a heart for memoirists, and you're working on a book at the moment, I understand, called Memoirists Are Contemporary Myth Makers. What's really capturing your heart and your mind about being a contemporary myth maker?
Huh. What a great question. I've taught memoir writing for a long time, excuse me, since the early 90s. And so I've read a lot of memoirs, both students and published memoirs. And what I started to notice is certain themes, and they are archetypal themes,
Mhm.
or they really speak to the domains of myth, which are who am I? What's my tribe, or what's my family?
Mm,
What's my journey? And what's my purpose?
mm,
And so the more I have thought about that, I really wanted to find myths, or at least mythic themes, that are reflected in contemporary memoirs, because I think the memoir has become huge
mhm,
since 94, basically,
mhm.
since Angela's Ashes, and also the Liars Club. It's like everyone decided, oh, I have a story to tell as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So I think what touches my heart, to answer your question, is that people are telling their stories and reflecting on them, and starting to see the different patterns throughout their lives, and making peace with those patterns
Mhm, mm.
as they identify them. So in the book, my chapters are who am I? What's
Mhm.
my tribe? What's my journey? What's my purpose? But also I'm looking at home.
Yeah.
I'm looking at exile. I'm looking at wounding, and I'm looking at spirituality, and
Mm.
how those ancient myths are reflected in current memoirs.
I look forward to that. I look forward to that. I want to pick up on the word home. What is your exploration around the term home?
What is home?
Yeah,
Um, how do I find home?
yeah,
Um, where do I belong?
yeah.
Do I belong anywhere? Do I belong in two places at once? Um, so, but deeply, how do I come home to myself?
Yeah.
That's certainly part of what I'm looking at.
I um I interviewed a guy recently. His name's James McRae. He has a very popular Instagram called Words Are Vibrations. He does lots of memes and stuff. One of the funny memes that he's put out, he's like, I'm a homesick alien.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And homesickness. Yeah. There's memoirs who write about homesickness, and also dreams of home. Like for years, I dreamed of a whitewashed cottage on the top of a hillside looking out to the water in
Mhm,
Ireland,
mhm,
because my background is Irish American. And when I went to Ireland in, I guess it was 1980, I went looking for that.
yeah, yeah.
My daughter and a friend and I went looking for it. And I think we found it. I think that we found this abandoned old cottage somewhere um, uh, near, well, in the West Coast. But
Mhm,
I think that dream of home really called to me for years. And I
mm.
hear about those dreams of home all the time, both in therapy and in people's writing.
Mm. I could talk to you all day, but I want to be super conscious and respectful of your time. I have a phrase here, always better than yesterday. It's called heartprint. And the word heartprint is a word that describes the legacy that we leave behind, through our words, through our actions, through our interactions. What do you think your heartprint is? What do you think the legacy of your work and your creation and your essence and your being is?
That's a lovely question. I think my legacy will be having spoken a journey for women, written a journey for women that gives them a sense of not having been on this journey alone, but that it's a collective journey and that we have value.
Yeah. What do you think becomes possible for women once they integrate the masculine and the feminine? Once they go through the journey, what now becomes possible for them?
I hope a sense of healing, a
Yeah.
sense of grace,
Mm.
a sense of satisfaction about, having been on this earth
Yeah.
and been in relationship
Mm.
with others and with the earth and with themselves
I did.
instead of always striving.
Yeah, a deep sense of satisfaction that maybe the things of this world can't provide.
Right. Yeah. And a sense of grace
Yeah, love
and
that.
gratitude.
I love that. Maureen, when is your book likely to come out, and where can they find out? Where can our listeners find more about the great work that you do in the world?
Oh, thank you. Well, the Heroine's Journey was published by Shambhala,
Mhm.
so certainly Shambhala, Amazon, and Memoirists as Contemporary Mythmaker will come out in 2023
Mhm.
and Shambhala is the publisher. So thank you for the plug.
Yeah, no, thank you. I hope we get to have another conversation again in future. I've really loved our time together, and I'd just be honored if you'd leave us with a final thought from your good self.
Well, my final thought is I'm so grateful that you're the father of a 7-year-old girl, and I think she's just so lucky. I can tell that you're a very heart-centered dad. So I'm grateful to you for this next generation of women.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say so. I'm equally a flawed human being. I'm fully aware of that, but I definitely have a heart to strive to be the best that I can be for that little girl and for her big brother as well. So thank you for those kind, affirming words. I take them to heart. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
thank you for this time. I've really appreciated it.
Thank you, Maureen. Take care.
Namaste.
Thank you for making it to the end of the interview here on YouTube. I hope that our time spent together has left you a little bit better than before you push play. Before you go anywhere, please leave a comment down below, some of your key reflections, your key takeaways. I love hearing from you and what this conversation has inspired in you. Let me know what you're going to do as a result of this conversation. I will be back next Wednesday where I will share another inspiring guest. To make sure that you don't miss that, please do subscribe. Hit the bell and you will be notified as soon as it goes live. If you're curious to know how I, through Always Better Than Yesterday, can serve you, your team, your organization, please do visit alwaysbetterthanyesterday.com, and it will be my honor and privilege to help you in any way I can. Keep leading, my friends. I've been Ryan Hartley, host of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast here on YouTube. Always love.